People vanish in these woods. It's not something the general public hears about, and it sure as hell isn't something we talk about openly. But it happens. It happens more often than you'd think. And it's not just the usual stuff. The lost hikers or the idiot campers who wander off. Those we can explain. Mostly. No, it's the others. The ones who disappear without a trace. Without any rhyme or reason. The ones where every possible explanation falls apart, and you're left standing there wondering if you're ever going to figure out what the hell happened. Those are the ones that keep me up at night. I've been a park ranger for 20 years, and I have seen things out there that I wish I hadn't. The kind of things that make you question everything you know about the world. You learn after a while that nature doesn't follow the same rules we do. Doesn't care about logic or reason or what's supposed to happen. It just is. And sometimes it takes people. No explanation. No sign of struggle. Just gone. There's one spot in particular that's always given me trouble. A clearing deep in the northern part of the park. It's not on any map. And most people don't know how to find it unless they really know the area. That's probably for the best. You wouldn't want to end up there. I've had to pull more than a few people out of that area, and not all of them have come back in one piece, if they've come back at all. I remember the first time I realized something was really wrong out there. It was about 10 years ago, maybe a little more. We got a call about a missing kid. A little girl who'd wandered off while her family was setting up camp. Now that kind of thing happens more often than you'd think, and usually we find them within a few hours. They're scared, maybe a little scraped up, but they're fine. This one was different though. We searched for 3 days. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers, everything. No sign of her. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. On the 4th day, we found her. Well, sort of. She was standing in the middle of that clearing, perfectly still, staring straight ahead, like she was in some kind of trance. Her clothes were dirty, and she had scratches on her arms and legs. But other than that, she was fine. Physically, anyway. But she wouldn't talk. Not to me, not to her parents, not to anyone. She just stood there, staring off into the distance like she couldn't hear us. When we tried to get her to move, she resisted. Not violently, just unwilling. It was like she wanted to stay there, like she needed to stay there. Eventually, we had to carry her out. I don't think I'll ever forget the way she looked as we walked away from that clearing. Her eyes kept flicking back to it, like she was leaving something behind. Something important. We took her to the hospital, of course, but they couldn't find anything wrong with her. No trauma, no injuries. Nothing. Her parents moved away a few months later, and that was the last I heard of her. That was the first time I knew there was something very wrong with this place, but it wouldn't be the last. There was a man, about 5 years after that, experienced hiker, knew the park like the back of his hand. He'd been coming here for years, always took the same trails, always checked in with us before heading out. Good guy. Respectful, didn't take unnecessary risks. He went missing on a stretch of trail not far from where the girl had been found. We launched a full search effort, combed every inch of the area. Again, nothing. For days, it was like he'd just vanished. And then on the 5th day, we found his backpack leaning against a tree. No sign of a struggle, no indication that he'd been attacked. The contents were still inside. Water, snacks, his map. It was like he'd set it down just a few minutes before we found it. But there was no sign of him. Not a single footprint, no indication that he'd gone off the trail. He was just gone. I've had more cases like that over the years. People who should have been easy to find. People who knew the area. People who didn't take risks. and yet they disappear. Sometimes we find them, but more often than not, we don't. When we do, they're usually not in any state to tell us what happened. Either they can't remember, or they refuse to talk about it. There is a pattern, though. The ones we do find, they always come back different, distant, like something's been taken from them. Some of them recover, but most don't. They just kind of fade away. I've read the reports, looked over the evidence. None of it makes sense. But the strangest one of all happened just last year. A group of 4 college kids came up here for a weekend camping trip. They were all outdoorsy types, used to hiking and camping in rough terrain. They set up camp near the river, about 6 miles from the station, and everything seemed fine. They checked in with us on their way out, and we didn't hear from them again. Not until one of them came stumbling back into the station 3 days later, alone. His clothes were torn, and he was covered in dirt. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the look on his face. He was terrified. He couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop talking. He kept saying the same thing over and over again. It took them. It took them. We tried to get him to calm down, tried to get a straight answer out of him, but he wasn't making any sense. Eventually, we managed to get enough out of him to piece together what had happened, or at least what he thought had happened. According to him, they'd been hiking through the northern part of the park, not far from the clearing I mentioned. They were off the main trail, but they knew where they were. At least they thought they did. He said it started with a strange feeling like they were being watched. They couldn't shake it no matter how far they walked. Then, they started hearing things. Voices, but not like normal voices. More like distant conversations. But there was no one around. No other hikers, no animals, nothing. He said they tried to ignore it, but the feeling kept getting worse. And then on the second night, one of his friends vanished. They woke up in the middle of the night and he was just gone. His sleeping bag was still there, his shoes, his pack, everything. But he was gone. They searched for hours, calling his name, trying to find any sign of where he'd gone, but there was nothing. Just like the others, Nothing. They packed up and started hiking back towards the station, figuring they'd report it and get a search party going. But then the second one disappeared. This time, the kid swore he'd seen it happen. They were walking, and suddenly his friend just wasn't there. One second he was right behind him, and the next he was gone. No sound, no sign of a struggle. Nothing. Just gone. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. The third one went next. The kid said he turned around to check on his friend, and she was just gone. He didn't even hear her leave. One second she was there, and the next she wasn't. He ran. He said he ran for miles, not stopping, not looking back, just running. Eventually he made it to the station, but all his friends were gone. We searched, of course, but we didn't find him. No sign of a struggle, no sign that they'd ever been there at all. We found their camp, though. It was exactly how the kid had described. 3 sleeping bags, 3 packs, all untouched. No sign of foul play, no sign of animals. Just empty. That kid never came back to the park, and I don't blame him. After what he saw, whatever it was, I wouldn't have come back either. I've asked myself 100 times what it is that takes these people. I've come up with every possible explanation. Wild animals, freak accidents, even some kind of human element, like a serial killer, or a group of crazies living off the grid. But none of that fits. Not really. Not with the way they disappear, and not with the way they come back, if they come back at all. I've looked into the history of the park, Tried to find anything that might explain what's going on here, but there's nothing. At least nothing concrete. There are stories, of course. There always are. Old legends, folk tales passed down by the native tribes that used to live in the area. They talk about spirits, about places in the woods where the boundary between worlds is thin, where people can be taken. But those are just stories, right? At least that's what I used to think. Now I'm not so sure. Anyway, I don't go near those clearings anymore. Not unless I have to. And even then, I don't linger. Something's out there. Something that doesn't want to be found, but at the same time, it's always watching. Always waiting for something. I thought about leaving the job, quitting. Moving somewhere far away where I don't have to think about it anymore. But every time I do, I remember the people who've disappeared. The families who never got answers. The ones still waiting for their loved ones to come back. And I know I can't leave. Not yet. Not until I figure out what's really going on. So I keep searching. Keep patrolling the same trails, hoping that one day I'll find something that makes sense. Something that explains all the disappearances. All the strange things that happen out here. I have seen some things in these woods that defy logic. But there are stories from other rangers, stories passed down between shifts, or whispered over the campfire, that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Some of them, you wish they were just that, stories. But a few of them, they're not. These are the ones that keep you looking over your shoulder at night. One that still bothers me is about a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time. Happened about 8 years ago, I think. Her family was camping at one of the park's more remote sites, an area that's not easy to reach without a good bit of experience hiking. They were seasoned campers, not the type to make dumb mistakes, and they'd set up their tent near a stream about 3 miles off the main trail. The parents said she wandered off while they were setting up for the evening. They thought she'd just gone to explore by the water or pick flowers like they often did on camping trips. When she didn't come back after a minute or so, they went looking for her. That was the start of a long, terrible search. We organized a team and spread out, sweeping the woods for any sign of her. We found footprints leading away from the camp, small ones, had to be hers for sure. But after about half a mile, they just stopped. No signs of struggle, no sign she'd fallen. They just ended. We searched for days. It's always worse when it's a kid, and we were determined to find her. But after the first week, we had to call it off. The woods had taken her. At least that's what we thought. And then 5 years later, she just walked out of the forest. It was early in the morning, just after dawn, when one of the other rangers spotted her. She was standing at the edge of the tree line near one of the old fire towers we don't use anymore. At first, he thought it was just some lost hiker's kid, maybe wandered off from a group. But as he got closer, he realized she wasn't just lost. She was the same girl who had disappeared all those years ago. The same face, the same clothes, though they were worn and ragged. And here's the craziest part. She looked like she hadn't aged a day. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at him with this distant, hollow look. When they brought her back to the station, she still wouldn't speak. It took hours before they could get anything out of her, and even then, it didn't make sense. She said she had been with him. When we pressed her on who him was, she just kept saying the same thing over and over again. The bear man. She talked about being taken by this creature, something that looked like a man but wasn't. She said it had fur like a bear, but walked on 2 legs, and had these huge yellow eyes that glowed in the dark. She said it had carried her deep into the woods, to a cave she didn't recognize. She lived there, alone, for what she thought was only a few days. But when she finally came back, everything had changed. 5 years had passed. I never saw that cave. We tried to get her to show us where it was, but every time we got close to the spot she described, she'd panic, start crying uncontrollably, saying it wasn't safe, that he was still there watching us. The parents took her and left the area for good, and I don't blame them. Now, I've never found any evidence of this so-called bear man, but her story has stuck with me. It wasn't the way she described him that scared me. It was the way she didn't. There was something about her eyes when she talked about it, like she had seen something she couldn't even begin to understand, and it had broken something inside her. Whatever took her, I don't believe it was from our world. And then there's the family. This one gets thrown around a lot, and it's one of those stories that should sound like pure fiction. But the family involved, 3 of them, a husband, wife, and their teenage son, they still swear it's true. It was late fall, right before the first snow, and they decided to do one last camping trip before winter set in. They picked a spot not far from the northern ridge, an area where the trees thin out, and you can get a clear view of the valley below. They set up camp, built a fire, and settled in for the night. According to them, it started out like any other camping trip. They cooked dinner over the fire, talked about their plans for the next day, and then something strange happened. Around midnight, as they were sitting around the dying embers, they saw movement in the trees. At first, they thought it was just a couple deer passing by, but then they saw the figures stepping into the clearing. There were 3 of them, pale, too pale, tall, thin, and silent. They walked slowly, almost gliding, they said, and their eyes reflected the firelight in an unnatural way. The family said they froze, unsure of what to do. The figures stopped just at the edge of the fire and stood there watching them. The husband, trying to be the rational one, called out to them, asking if they were lost or needed help, but they didn't say anything. They just stood there, staring with these wide, dark eyes that didn't blink. And then one of them smiled. Now, the wife swears that's when she realized something was very wrong. The smile wasn't right. Too wide, too sharp, like the teeth were more animal than human. That's when the figures started to move closer. They circled the fire, still not speaking, just smiling. The family did the only thing they could think of. They grabbed whatever they could and they bolted for their car, which was parked about 100 yards away. They didn't bother packing up the tent or anything else. They just ran. They said they could hear something following them, footsteps moving faster than should have been possible. But when they reached the car and turned on the headlights, there was nothing there. They drove back to the ranger station in a full-blown panic, half expecting to see those things, whatever they were, again. When they got there, they told us everything. They were very scared, I could see that. Their hands were shaking. These weren't the kind of people to make up stories. We went back the next morning to check out their camp, and the tent was still there, half collapsed, and the fire pit was cold. There was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no tracks, nothing. The family never came back to the park after that. They moved a few states away, and the son apparently still has nightmares about those figures to this day. Some of the other rangers think they just scared themselves. Maybe they ate something that messed with their heads, or maybe they just got spooked by an animal. But I don't think so. I've heard too many stories like theirs. There's another one I've heard a few times, but this one's harder to pin down. Doesn't involve any one person or family, but a recurring phenomenon that's been reported over the years. I've never seen it myself, but enough people have mentioned it that I can't just dismiss it outright. They call it the staircase. It's exactly what it sounds like, and maybe you've heard of it. Just a set of stairs, standing out in the middle of the woods with no structure attached to them. No explanation for why they're there. Some say the stairs look old, like something out of a crumbling mansion, while others say they're newer, almost pristine, like they were just built. But the stories all agree on one thing: you shouldn't climb them. The reports are always the same. Hikers stumble across the stairs, usually off the beaten path, deep in the more isolated parts of the park. Some of them get curious and climb to the top. And that's when things go bad. People who've climbed the stairs report feeling disoriented when they reach the top. Like something's changed, but they can't quite put their finger on it. A few have said that when they look back down, the forest looks different, almost alien. And then when they descend, they find they're no longer in the same place they were before. The trees are wrong, the trails don't match up, and the way back seems impossibly far. The lucky ones manage to find their way back after hours or even days of wandering. The unlucky ones, well, I think you can guess. They don't come back at all. There are more stories, of course. Stories of strange lights seen through the trees late at night, of voices calling from nowhere, of figures standing at the edge of campsites, watching but never approaching. Every ranger has a story, whether they'll admit it or not. Some are more willing to talk than others, but we all know there's something out there that we don't fully understand. I've thought about leaving these stories behind, walking away from the park and the strange things that happen here, but like I said, I can't. It's like the forest itself has a hold on me. Maybe I've seen too much, heard too much. Maybe it won't let me go anymore. You know, I think about that little girl sometimes, the one who came back after all those years, and I wonder if there are others like her, people who've been taken, held somewhere in the dark corners of the forest, just waiting to come back. Maybe they're still out there, lost in some place we can't reach, watching us, and waiting for the right moment to step back into our world. I don't know. And then I think about the ones who never come back. I wish I could say the stories stopped there, but they don't. It's like every time I think I have heard the strangest thing these woods have to offer, something else comes along that defies explanation the most. There was this one incident, one that still confuses the hell out of me to this day. It involved a family camping near the southern edge of the park, closer to the more developed areas, but still deep enough into the wilderness to feel isolated. They had a son, maybe 10 or 11, who was in a wheelchair. He had a spinal condition, but he loved being outdoors. His parents had outfitted the chair with some all-terrain wheels so he could join them on hikes, even if they had to stick to the more flat trails. They seemed like a close-knit, very happy family, the kind that wouldn't let anything keep them from making memories together. Anyway, one night, they settled in at their campsite near a small lake, roasted marshmallows, told stories by the fire, normal camping stuff. The boy went to bed early, and his parents stayed up a little later, enjoying the quiet. At some point, they both dozed off. When they woke up, the boy was gone. I can't even begin to imagine the terror they must have felt when they realized their son wasn't in his tent. They searched everywhere, called his name, but there was no sign of him. His wheelchair was still there, right where they'd left it beside the tent. It didn't make any sense. He couldn't walk on his own. How could he have just disappeared? We got the call early the next morning. Search teams were dispatched immediately. We assumed the worst, that he'd been taken. Maybe by an animal, maybe a person. But there were no tracks, no signs of struggle. The wheelchair itself hadn't been disturbed, and there were no footprints leading away from the campsite. And then 2 days later, we found him. He was discovered 47 miles away, on top of a mountain that would have been impossible for him to reach on his own, even if he could walk. He was unharmed, sitting on a flat rock, looking out over the valley below like he'd been waiting for someone to find him. But that's not the strangest part. Next to him, there was a large German shepherd, black and gray, with intelligent eyes. It didn't growl or act aggressively when the search team approached. It just stood there, almost like it was guarding the boy from something and waiting for us to come. When the boy's father knelt down to hug him, the dog gave off a single bark and just ran off into the woods. Nobody could catch it. It just vanished into the trees. Now the boy was dazed, but otherwise fine. He couldn't explain how he'd gotten there. All he could remember was falling asleep in his tent and waking up on the mountain with a dog next to him. He said the dog had stayed with him the whole night, keeping him warm and growling at something in the trees. Like I said, we never found the dog. No one in the area owned a German shepherd like that. We checked, and none of the local shelters had any missing. It was like the animal had appeared out of nowhere, done its job, and just disappeared again. That case haunted me for a long time. Not because of the boy, he was fine, thank God, but because of the impossibility of it all. How does a child in a wheelchair end up 47 miles away on top of a mountain with no explanation? And what was the dog? Was it some kind of guardian, a spirit maybe? I don't know, but it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. A few years before that, another ranger told me about a case where a woman had been hiking with her dog, a border collie, when she disappeared. The dog came back alone weeks later, looking perfectly healthy but without any sign of its owner. We never found her. The dog couldn't explain where it had been, and neither could we. Then there's the story of the lost campers. This one gets talked about around here a lot, though no one's ever officially confirmed it. It's one of those tales that's passed down from ranger to ranger, and each time, well, it gets a little more unsettling. The story goes that a group of campers went missing back in the 1970s. They were college kids on a weekend trip deep into the northern part of the park, far from any established campsites. They were supposed to return on Sunday, but they never showed up. A search team was sent out, and after a few days, they found the campsite. Tents still pitched, food still out, but no campers. The weird part was that the campsite looked undisturbed, like they just stepped away for a moment and never came back. There were no signs of struggle, no animal tracks, nothing that would suggest they'd been attacked or wandered off. Just emptiness. Sometime later, one of the campers stumbled into the ranger station looking disoriented and confused. He couldn't remember what had happened or where the others had gone. All he could say was that they had heard something out in the woods, something calling to them, and they had followed it. But when asked what it was, he just couldn't explain. All he said was, it wasn't a person. The other campers were never found. We get stories like that a lot. Hikers or campers hearing things out in the woods that they can't explain. Some say they hear voices calling their names. Others say they hear music, like a far-off song on the wind. It always leads them off the trail deeper into the woods. Sometimes they come back, and well, like I told you before, more often they don't. I used to think it was just the wind. Maybe some trick of the mind, people get spooked being out there in the middle of nowhere. But the more I hear these stories, the harder it is to chalk up to just imagination. There is something out there. There's a section of the park we call the Dead Zone. No one really knows how it got that name, but it has stuck. It's not an official designation, of course, but we avoid it whenever we can, trust me. It's an area where compasses stop working, and GPS signals drop out completely. You can be walking with all your gear perfectly calibrated, and the moment you step into that zone, it is like you are cut off from the rest of the world. Time moves differently there too. You'll think you've been walking for an hour, but when you come out, it's only been minutes, or vice versa. The worst part is, there are stories of people going in and never coming out. One guy, a hiker with years of experience, disappeared in the dead zone about 15 years ago. We searched for him for weeks, but there was no sign of him. And then about a year later, another hiker found his clothes hanging on the branch of a tree, along with his wallet and a set of keys. The really weird thing, the clothes, keys, everything looked brand new, not dirty or worn out at all. And his family did confirm that everything was his. But we never found any other trace of him. I try not to think about that place too much, but sometimes late at night, when I'm on patrol and the forest is unnervingly still, I wonder just how many people have gone missing out here. How many are still out there, wandering around, trying to find their way back, and what they might have seen. Well, I could go on. There are countless stories like these, each one stranger than the next, believe me. And yet somehow they all feel connected. I've been thinking a lot lately about the people we've lost. Some we found, some we haven't. And there are days I wonder if they ever really left. If maybe they're just beyond our reach, I don't know what's out there, but I feel things sometimes. Every ranger who's been here long enough does. It's not things you can see, not really. You just kind of feel a presence. There's something out there in those woods. Something that's been here long before I got here. And something that'll be there long after I'm dead and gone. Maybe I'll never see it. Hell, maybe I don't want to. And who knows, maybe one day I'll be the one who disappears. I'll tell you this much, whatever's out there does not care how experienced you are, how prepared you think you might be. It doesn't care if you've seen 100 strange things or none at all. When it wants you, it takes you. No questions, no explanations. I just hope that if I ever go missing out here, that there's someone like me to tell my story.